Amazon is a logistics company. It had to become masterful at certain technologies, but their core DNA couldn't be more different. So you're not going to hire creatives. You're going to hire people that are efficient and optimizers and really, really good
operators.
Yeah.
Perfecting
low
the
margin
systems.
Amazon versus high margin Microsoft.
Yeah,
Until
cloud.
AWS.
When they figured out AWS, they're like, holy
cow.
shit, margins. Let's take on the world.
And then let's fuel every other crazy project we can do. Yeah.
And they become super creative since then.
Yeah.
And now AI, this next generation of ex-Amazon folks, I think we'll see more and more of that.
Hi, and welcome to GeekWire. I'm GeekWire co-founder Todd Bishop.
And I'm GeekWire co-founder John Cook.
We are pleased to be joined in the GeekWire offices, in the studio, as it were, by Michael Schutzler, who is the outgoing, recently retired CEO of the WTIA, the Washington Technology Industry Association. Michael, it's great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Great to see you both in person again. It's been a long time.
Likewise, the last time we had you on the show, it was on Zoom or some such.
Yeah, that's right.
So you recently announced your retirement from the WTIA, and we got a chance to catch up with you a little bit at the event that the WTIA had, but you've been such a great person to talk with over the years to get a perspective on the tech industry that I thought it would be an interesting opportunity to do a little bit of an exit interview.
Sounds great.
Yeah. So
Here come the hardball questions. All right, this will be fun.
We've been packing these away for years.
So, Michael, give us a sense for where you are right now, why you decided this was the right moment for you to step down and step into retirement, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the tech industry broadly.
Yeah, sure. This is the right time for the org. You know, I loved this was a weird gig. I was only supposed to do this for a couple of years to turn around a broken little trade association, and I had just sold Live Mocha to Rosetta Stone, and I was kind of riding a motorcycle around and checking out the world, and there's this weird gig came up, and I was just going to do a little turnaround and just help out a little bit and see how it went. And there, you know, I've just spent 11 years there. It's been a really, really cool experience. The org started out as a trade association, and it exploded and expanded into multiple organizations. And it had become genuinely untenable to run these three very different things as if they were one. They were all necessarily bound together at the beginning because they were all embryos, but they'd grown up and they'd been a thing. And so it was time to reconstruct the organization into three different companies. And it just seemed like a really good time for me to step aside and let other people run the parts.
So you've got the main WTIA, which is a not-for-profit member trade association.
Right.
And then explain the other parts of the org.
The very first thing that we did to really shift things around is we had been, like a lot of organizations, and I think you guys do this at GeekWire too, we'd basically been a lead gen for a healthcare brokerage. And then we realized how that whole system worked, and we realized, actually, we can be a broker. But a trade association can't really do that and stay nonprofit. So we created a for-profit subsidiary that did the brokering. And then ultimately we ended up absorbing a whole lot more than that. And it ended up becoming a whole corporation to create healthcare and 401k and other kind of services for startups. That created a whole bunch of money that allowed us to co-fund with the US government a bizarre experiment of trying to create a European-style apprenticeship in the United States. And Apprenti was born out of that. And it was the only reason we won the contract was because we agreed to essentially co-finance the thing. It was a requirement from the original US DOL grant. So we got this thing up and running and used the funding coming out of this brokerage that we built to build that. That's how it all happened, at least from a business standpoint.
And the aspect you're talking about with the health plan and the whole idea of employee retirement too, that's called Portalis.
Correct.
Okay. So it strikes me as you describe this, that you really ran this trade association like you were running a startup. I mean, you came in with a real entrepreneurial mindset. Am I on the right track?
Not intentionally, but I think in retrospect, I don't think I really had a choice. My whole career for the last 30 years has been either running a startup or playing angel investor, or helping other people launch startups. It just kind of naturally happened. I got this really great piece of advice. This was my first nonprofit, and I got some really great piece of advice from a friend who had been running a nonprofit, and she said, "No margin, no mission." She said, people who run nonprofits typically make the mistake of thinking that nonprofit means no profit. It means no taxes on profit. And so if you think through the business mindset of running it with the same discipline that you run a business, you have to follow the money. So I went to the few member companies that we had and a lot of member companies we didn't have. And I said, "What do you want?" And they told us two things. Can you help us get health care? Because we can't. Can you get it affordably? And then can you find more people to do the job? So we tried recruiting and lots of experiments, but we ended up in those two other businesses because that's what tech companies in the region told us to do. Just follow the money.
Yeah, a big part of your focus was shifting to startups, and you were in this unique place where you have to balance between the interests of big tech and startups, and they're not always aligned. So I'm curious how you balance that over your years.
That's actually one of the hardest things about this job. I got to know the folks who were running tech trade associations in other parts of the country. It's a very common issue, what you're pointing out. Probably
pretty unique here because we have, Amazon, Microsoft, T-Mobile, some pretty big technology brands.
Unbelievably unfair competitive advantage compared to most other communities who are trying to build, a tech hub from scratch. We definitely have a lot of assets. And it's funny, John, because on the one hand, a policy like a good example of this would be a policy like non-competes, which, boy, there were lots of arguments and fighting about that for a long time. There actually was more alignment than non-alignment among small companies and large companies. But, a large company might really care an awful lot about tax policy, and small companies are like, yeah, whatever. I couldn't care less about that. Can you just help me find people? That's what I care about. So the prioritization for the organization was always difficult. We were serving essentially two masters with one limited pile of money. That was what really made it the hardest.
So give us a grade of where the Washington tech economy is now. We get asked this a lot. I would love to just have a discussion and debate around that because they're kind of, as we just touched on, they're kind of two elements to the technology community here. There's the big tech and there's the startup community. But when you take both of those together, where are we at? Are you bullish on where things are at? What's your sense of the market here?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of leading indicators that I have been watching and I think that are going to be necessary to continue to watch to really be able to address that. The first is this industry doesn't exist without talent. Where is the talent? And is it working for the companies that are based here?
Is it shifting? It seems like it's shifting a lot.
So different now.
It's a very different ballgame.
Because of COVID and the pandemic, shifting where people are working, or
some organizations are trying real hard to bring the people back. Other organizations, startups, are saying, just hardcore saying, you're either showing up in the office or you're not part of the team. But many other organizations, large and small, are saying, wait, I have access to way more talent from everywhere if I'm just looser on that restriction. I have no idea where that's going to shake itself out, but early indications, John, are that the companies who are capable of building really good, productive cultures around hybrid are going to win because they have access to more talent. So actually, the nexus of where the company is more important than 10 years ago, where the nexus of where is the talent. It's still important. Don't get me wrong. The fact that we have a lot of talent here and it still wants to migrate here, our net migration is still positive. But it's less important than where is the company forming, because where the company forms is where the economic benefits accrue to the community in which it's operating.
I just wanted to push back on that a little bit because I've talked to a number of companies that have their headquarters here, but have much of their engineering staff in India, as an example. And maybe 10 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. And so I'm wondering if the talent, you're saying we still have that net migration of talent, which I agree with, but I'm just questioning whether the importance of having that nexus and headquarters here, you're saying that still matters a lot.
It does, because there are very few pure virtual companies, all remote only. Where the headquarters is where the relationship is to the community. A large engineering, well, let's just look at what we have here. Google has huge presence here. Originally, because they wanted to park next to Microsoft and turn on the Hoover vacuum and suck as much talent as they could from Redmond to Kirkland, right? And they've been doing a good job of that, right? But now they have a huge footprint downtown, right?
Yeah.
They have very large engineering, but really the power of the organization is still in California. And they've got more than just engineering offices here. They have engineering offices all over the world. I think that's a model that makes sense to look through the whole industry, John, because I think what matters ultimately is if you get large enough in a satellite office, then you're going to build local relationships, just as Google and Apple and Salesforce and many other California companies have done here. But Microsoft and Amazon, they throw a lot more weight around here because they're here. And their relationships in this region are very different than their relationships in other states.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is you're talking about a hybrid world.
Yes.
And so in that scenario, it's a little bit different than what you're talking about, John, where it's fully remote. I mean, overseas remote, which we actually did see before the pandemic as well. But to your point,
that's been happening, guys. Don't forget, this has been happening for decades.
Yes.
There was this whole CS, remember, customer service was all exported. With the gaming industry was doing all of its design and everything in Shanghai, and then they've decided and then the whole thing sucked back into the US. There's ebbs and flows in this industry, and has been for decades, about where the talent is.
Putting remote work and hybrid work and in-person work aside,
stepping
back to that question on kind of our grade of where we're at.
Oh yeah.
Where would you say we're at, irrespective of where that, and you mentioned talent, and it is important, but
so I'm part of an organization of other tech trade associations in the US and Canada. So there's 67 of us all together. They get together quite frequently. We are still very much the envy of places like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Austin, Texas, you name it. The place that we've always been really super competitive with is the Bay Area. And they've had a negative net migration of talent, but they don't have a negative net migration of money. They're doing really well on dollars. And I think they're always, I think
more dollars to fewer people.
I think for the rest of our lifetimes, and maybe the next generation, I think Silicon Valley will continue to be much, much larger than this area for a whole host of reasons. But we're doing very well as an industry in this region. I think the region is still struggling relative to Philadelphia, San Diego, Austin. You compare those cities with the Seattle area, we're still really much in recovery from COVID.
And you wrote about this in a really great blog post that I will link to from the show notes. It's called 40 Years of Transformation. And you actually trace this back, this specific aspect that you're talking about right now, to decisions that were made by public policymakers in the 1980s.
Yes, sir.
So let's talk about that when we come back. You're listening to GeekWire, and we will be right back. This GeekWire podcast is brought to you by BECU. Stay tuned as Brian Westbrook interviews BECU's Stacy Black for today's Money Hack about minimizing the impact of uncertain times on your financial health. And for more money hacks, check out geekwire.com/BECU.
How do uncertain times affect your financial health? I'm Brian Westbrook, host of Money Hacks presented by BECU, joined by Stacy Black, lead financial educator for BECU. The world around us is changing, Stacy. What do we do?
Yeah, we need to stay focused on what we can control. It's really volatile right now, and there's not a lot we can control. So focus in on what you have control over and look for resources. BECU has great resources for our members, so check with your financial institution and see how they can help. And remember to stay focused on your financial goals. That's why we're going through this work.
We'll have more on this topic, including the latest on student loan forgiveness and what we should do when this topic keeps changing in the world around us. Thank you, Stacy. For more on this topic, visit Money Hacks at geekwire.com/BECU.
Listen to the full interview and find more episodes of Money Hacks at geekwire.com/BECU and find more information at becu.org. Welcome back. It's Todd Bishop with John Cook. Our guest this week is the retiring CEO of the Washington Technology Industry Association, the WTIA, Michael Schutzler. By the way, we should have mentioned earlier, he has been succeeded by Kelly Fukai.
Correct.
Who is going to be leading the association going forward. The chair of the organization is someone we all know well, Dave Cotter. This is an organization that we've always enjoyed interacting with, and not just because of you, although we love talking to you, Michael, but you've got a great team there, and It's going to be great to see where things head from here. Okay. You wrote what was essentially a history of Seattle tech. And one of the things that struck me in this post, 40 Years of Transformation, is that, people ask, okay, how can they be Seattle, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Raleigh, Boston? And I mean, it's kind of like, okay, go back 40 years, go back 50 years and make the right decisions. And a lot of the right decisions were made here in terms of the industry. But you also write about a lot of the public policy decisions that were made. Explain what you would have done differently had you been governor in the 1980s.
Well, I think you'd have to be governor and mayor of multiple cities, executive of several counties, and something not far from an emperor to actually pull off what was necessary at the time. And we're still balkanized that way here. The way we make decisions about everything from road repair to sewer systems, that's still very balkanized here. And it's just the nature of how we're structured as a region. I think there's two sets of mistakes that actually go back, Todd, to the 1960s. We had an opportunity in that time frame to build public transit with federal money. And the NIMBYs in this region didn't want to do that.
It went to Atlanta.
Yeah, it did. And so what a shame, what a loss. That same inability to collaborate among even pockets of the city, let alone other cities in a county and multiple counties, that inability for our region to collaborate effectively has led to zoning decisions that have led to poor decisions about road construction, public transportation, zoning of housing, and most of the really significant issues we have, either when you look at transportation or housing in this region, they're decades of inaction or decades of poor decisions that have led to where we're at now. The expectation at the time was that we were just going to continue that slow growth that we had been doing for decades. Nobody in their right mind anticipated the kind of explosion of growth in population and wealth that came as a result of the tech industry having launched here in many ways. Much of what we know as the internet is started here.
That's one of the things that struck me. And of course, you know this history, but it's one thing to know it generally and another to have it laid out like you did in this post. The gift that was given to this region by the wireless and the telecom industries, the Craig McCaws of the world, is just remarkable, and the way it rippled through the economy. Although I have to say, one of my thoughts as I was reading this was, well, geez, why didn't Seattle become Silicon Valley, given this giant head start that it had in this fundamental piece of infrastructure for the world?
Yeah.
In terms of mobile, you're saying?
Yeah. With McCaw Cellular, McCaw Communications, AT&T Wireless. I mean, it became T-Mobile. I don't mean to underestimate what T-Mobile does.
Well, didn't the carriers become somewhat of commodities, and then it became Apple with a device that really kind of broke through, and we didn't have that.
That's right. And if you think about it, like the root of what made this industry great, there was a great article in the Wall Street Journal recently in a podcast about this. Chips, and chips, right? That's in the time frame we're talking about, which was the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It was the revolution of silicon chips and all those transistors that getting smaller and smaller and smaller and creating more and more computing power. I mean, I was learning how to program on a computer in the 1970s, and it was super cool because it was the size of a refrigerator and not the size of a building. My iPhone is thousands of times more powerful than the thing that I was learning how to program on, 40 years ago. It's the chips is where the money went. And it required a lot of capital to build those facilities. It took a lot of capital to build those industries. And that's where the capital accrued. It makes perfect sense, frankly.
And earlier than what we saw in Seattle, I think, Silicon Valley being the birthplace of chips and hardware and some of those early computers, and then Seattle really being the birthplace of software.
You bet.
And
desktop software.
Software.
Really,
and
which then extrapolated itself into the enterprise software through Microsoft's decision-making in part.
You bet.
Yeah, and then I think you could argue whether Seattle was the birthplace of the internet or not. Maybe Seattle missed that to a degree, but then Amazon kind of recovered some of that
in a big way,
some of that credibility in a big way. I'm curious, looking ahead, now we're at the AI revolution we're going through. Do you think Seattle is going to be looked back upon as the birthplace of AI, or at least a major center of AI?
Crucible, one of the crucibles.
Yes.
We'll be telling ourselves that for a long time. The problem is we don't have enough New York in us. We don't know how to market ourselves at all. Like we're just not good drum beaters to tell everybody it all started here.
We got our heads buried in books.
We do.
And coffee.
And it's funny, like you said enterprise software earlier. It's funny to me that this region is tremendous at building out enterprise software companies. Silicon Valley has been great, especially over the last few decades, of building these incredibly successful consumer software companies. Again, but a lot more money in that industry, a lot more profit than in enterprise software. With a lot of M&A exits here, way more IPO exits down there. So there's another reason why there's more money down there than there is up here. But that doesn't mean, we haven't been a significant contributor. As I've said, we're just crappy marketers. Like, we should be telling the world what it is that we did on AI. Machine learning, Mechanical Turk, guys, was around for a while, but Amazon really, really industrialized it and commercialized it, and then ultimately turned it into machine learning, which has now become, with a giant sea of data they've had, it's been essential for them to build AI.
So you think this region is well positioned then for this next revolution that's coming with AI?
Very much so. And I think that, Heather Redmond and her partners were prescient when they formed Flying Fish. 100% focused on AI before anybody else even knew nobody else was talking about it. I think there's so many wonderful companies forming here in that space. I think we have a great opportunity here.
Heather Redmond, a longtime venture capitalist with Flying Fish Partners, she leads Flying Fish Partners. And you're right. It's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that, Michael. Like, they were talking about AI long before ChatGPT. That was their focus.
Way, way before. Yeah. And they already knew then that the actual power of AI isn't the tool itself. It's not the software. It's the application. What are you doing with artificial intelligence? That's the radical transformation that's underway. The ChatGPT is really awesome demo software. It's fun to play with. It's very clever. It's very interesting. Does some fun stuff. The actual power is, how do you take an LLM and apply it to medical technology? How do you apply that to manufacturing processes? How do you apply that to cybersecurity, both on the attack side as well as on the defense side? This is where AI is really going to make a big impact.
And it gets back, I've got Microsoft on my brain because I'm working on the 50th anniversary series.
You've been writing a lot about Microsoft lately. I've noticed that.
And historically.
And it seems like, to your point, I mean, they made the decision very early on to focus on the software. And it's interesting how those companies that are first, Boeing, Physio-Control, Microsoft, the decisions that they made early on, even though they were making them for the companies themselves, it just sort of rippled out throughout the industry. And in fact, you at the WTIA did this map. Do you remember the universe? Yeah. The universe. Right. And it's incredible. And that's one of the things you talk about in the post as well. Just even examples that people wouldn't even expect, like real networks, and the amount of entrepreneurial activity that Rob Glazer's former lieutenants have created in the region. I mean, and I just think back to like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And we spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh, so I always think of that. they would kill for a real networks, maybe back in the 90s, maybe not the real networks of today necessarily, although they probably love to have them now. I don't know, just a different company today. But it's amazing how much that little nucleus of an idea of a company can sort of spin out and have an impact on the rest of the ecosystem.
Generational ripple effects, for sure, both in terms of the entrepreneurial talent, the technical talent, but also the money. Those folks that made their money as Microsoft employees then started their own companies. They became angel investors. They helped birth the next generation. Those folks made a whole bunch of money. Those folks built a lot of skill and experience. They taught the next generation. They funded the next generation. It's actually still going on here.
We've certainly seen that with Microsoft. I've been surprised over the years, and I'd love to get your take on why we haven't seen more of that out of Amazon. I don't feel like we have seen that ripple effect. And now Amazon is, 30 years old?
Mm-hmm.
There is a huge exception. While Michael's thinking about his answer to that, there's a huge exception to that
There are
rule.
multiple exceptions, but I
but
don't
there's
think
one
it's
just
been
recently.
as much momentum
Very true.
out of Amazon. You can certainly disagree. I'd love to hear if Michael disagrees with that.
Sorry, but let me just say, Dave Clark, the former Amazon Worldwide Consumer CEO, has a new startup that came out of the gate in supply chain logistics technology with $100 million in funding, and they just announced. Talk about a big bang kind of approach. They announced their first 11 executive slate of leaders. I mean, so that there is an exception.
There are many exceptions. I just don't think we have seen multiple public companies that have been spun out by ex-Amazon people that are based here
Yet. I think
like Instacart, ex-Amazon, but not based here for whatever reason,
And for what it's worth, John, I'm not gonna disagree with you for once.
Good. I would love for you to do so. It makes for better content on the podcast.
I actually think that there's a reason why Amazon hasn't yet produced the same kind of volume that a Microsoft, alumni network has. Microsoft is a software company. From day one, that's what they were. And they hired people who were creatives, inventing stuff that hasn't been invented, or back in the days, embrace and extend was the euphemism for taking other people's ideas and making them better. And they've done a brilliant job of that for decades. Amazon is a logistics company. It was a retailer from day one. It had to become masterful at certain technologies. But their core DNA couldn't be more different. So you're not going to hire creatives. You're going to hire people that are efficient and optimizers and really, really good
operators.
Yeah.
Perfecting
low
the
margin
systems.
Amazon versus high margin Microsoft.
Yeah, until they figured out how to do, right?
Yeah.
Until
cloud.
Until
AWS.
When they figured out AWS, they're like, holy
cow.
shit, margins. Let's take on the world.
And then let's fuel every other crazy project we can do. Yeah.
And they become super creative since then.
Yeah.
And now AI, this next generation of ex-Amazon folks, I think we'll see more and more of that coming out of Amazon.
Well, and who knows, maybe the 5 days in the office mandate will drive some of those people who want to be a little more flexible with their schedule to start their own companies.
Or not. Maybe they'll just hang out for 5 days a week until it's time to punch out. Yeah,
Yes.
That's right. And then they'll do it their own way.
I need to look this up just to confirm it, but I'm pretty sure that AWS was responsible for more than 60% of Amazon's overall operating profits in the last quarter.
Oh,
That
yeah,
is
in the last
nuts to
quarter.
me.
But when they invented it, it was like 250% of their profit, right?
Right.
There was no profit in the rest of the business.
Right. And that speaks to the fact that, yes,
my
Amazon
goodness.
has lost its leash with Wall Street overall in terms of the magic that Jeff Bezos once had to string investors along for decades.
Well, investors have changed too. Their appetites changed. Their everyone's learned, including investors, that it's a different world to sell now than it was in 1995 when he was pounding the pavement.
Michael, 2 questions for you. When you talk to those 60 plus executives of other trade organizations that represent tech, curious what they say about Seattle specifically, what stands out to them. And then 2, are there any in that group of cities, regions that you're kind of paying attention to? You think they've got their act together
I like that.
and are really forming a really strong nucleus of a tech innovation hub?
Yeah, Philadelphia's doing very well.
Oh, really?
Todd has spent time in Philadelphia.
Yeah,
That's where I
You
got
have
my
to go
start.
back and visit, Todd.
Yeah, right. I was a young stringer for the Philadelphia Inquirer out of college. Why
That
Philadelphia?
brings
Yeah, what
back-
stands out about what they're doing?
They have a really good collection of venture capitalists, maker spaces, accelerators, just like we do, and they have they're really good at collaborating in Philly relative to us. We tend to be, I don't know, special mushrooms out here, and everybody
Competitive.
We all like sing Kumbaya together while stabbing each other in the back. Whereas in Philadelphia, they punch each other in the face and they drink beer later. It's a very different culture. Having grown up near Philly, I know what I'm talking about. It's still like that, and Philly's doing well. But here's another one that'll blow your mind: Manitoba is doing incredibly well for the same reason. They're collaborating really well. They've got education, industry, and government all working together to create the environment that is helping rapidly grow tech startups in Manitoba. Wouldn't have guessed that, but and then Windsor, Ontario is also doing
Yeah, we've
really well.
partnered with Calgary in the past, and their efforts to try to get their, diversify beyond natural resources into tech. And so you're seeing a lot of cities trying to do that.
I want to point out your journalistic flaw that you just did. You just asked a double barrel question, and Michael answered the one that he wanted
I
to
still
answer.
have the second part
Okay,
of it.
let's go.
Well, actually, I think it was the first part of the question, which was, what has stood out to you about this region?
No,
It
it
was-
wasn't. You don't even remember what it was. You said, what do they say about Seattle?
what do they
Which
say?
I actually like that question better.
Okay, what are the other? That's right, Todd. Thank you for correcting me. What do the other regions say about us, good and bad?
There's really not much bad to say about us. We're still very much the envy of the other regions in this country, with one obvious exception. If you talk about Silicon Valley, they don't envy anything up here other than maybe the fact that we have a little less vitriol here than they do down there. It's about the only place that has more than we do in terms of the public discourse about what's the impact of tech been on the region. But if you go to a place like Chicago, you go to a place like Atlanta, you go to a place like Phoenix, they're doing okay, really, really well for them locally. But when they compare themselves to us, they're like, wow, you folks really have got an unfair competitive advantage. And we do. We really do. Talent, money, good cooperation between large and small companies, Amazon, Microsoft. They're some of the biggest supporters of our startup program. They're great.
Okay. When we come back, Michael, I want to ask you a little bit about what's next for you, because I think there might be some tech angles there as well. So we'll do
Let's
that.
just say it involves AI and music, because I think we're going to have to tease ahead.
One of my favorite topics. That's coming up next. It's Todd Bishop, and I wanted to tell you about a favorite podcast of mine. It's called Booming, and it's a show that has opened my eyes to a whole range of things, like what's really happening when I scan a digital coupon at the grocery store, and how robots are changing the construction of buildings in downtown Seattle, among many other topics. Booming is a podcast from KUOW Public Radio in Seattle. It's about the economic forces shaping our lives in the Pacific Northwest. It's co-hosted by reporters Joshua McNichols and Monica Nicholsberg. That's a familiar name and voice to longtime GeekWire readers and listeners. They answer questions that listeners are wondering about, like why are sports tickets so expensive? Or how hard should you actually work at work? Plus, every episode ends with a game. That's Booming from KUOW Public Radio. Find episodes on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back. It's Todd Bishop with John Cook. We're here with Michael Schutzler. He is the longtime CEO of the WTIA, who has just recently retired, the Washington Technology Industry Association.
Former CEO.
Former
Bye-bye.
CEO.
By the time you hear this, you'll no longer be
I'll
CEO.
no longer be here. Yes.
Especially after this episode airs.
That's right. Yeah. We expected more bombs being thrown.
Well, you didn't ask any really terribly hard questions.
Well,
Thank
come
you
on.
guys.
No,
you guys have
geez.
been so nice.
No, it's just we're not on our game today, I guess. All right. So what are you going to do now?
Yeah, so I'm going to give myself permission to do things I've never done. I'm going to spend an entire month surfing and doing nothing else except surfing. I'm going to spend 5 weeks in a silent meditation retreat at a Zen monastery.
Are you joking?
No, I'm dead serious.
Wow.
How
Tell
many
us
months?
more.
How many months?
5 weeks.
5 weeks. Okay.
Tell us more what that's going to be like and why you've decided
The longest
to do
I've
that.
ever done it is 10 days. 5 weeks, that seems like a good, nice, long period of time to be in silence and practicing Zen meditation. For me, it's about pushing a reset button. I've spent my entire career, in fact, I've spent my entire adult life in service of expectations, trying to meet or exceed expectations. I'm super competitive. I'm super driven. I'm the son of immigrants, so I'm kind of wired that way. And I just want to take a period of time in my life to just turn it all off and walk into the next phase with an open mind about what do I want to be when I grow up? And I'm allowing myself to experiment with things that I've been dreaming about. And one of those has been composing and performing music.
Well, before we get to the music, your wife must love that, the whole idea of you being silent for 5 weeks. Sorry, is that too personal?
My wife is now gotten to reach a point. She's been through her grief process. She's reached a point of acceptance and understanding that I really do need this in my life. I'm going to basically be off the grid for pretty close to 90 days. So like I've had a number of family members asking me what is wrong with me, but I've had a lot of friends say, "Yeah, you do need this, and you go do you, and just unplug for a while."
I guess we won't have you on the podcast during that time period.
That would be a really dull podcast.
Yeah, it'd be
Did
very-
you take anything out of your 10-day meditation? And
Yeah, that was about 20 years ago, and that taught me how to take a deep breath in a highly charged, emotionally conflict situation and just breathe through it. And, 9 times out of 10, I was able to do it. Every once in a while, it still would get my goat. I got into some arguments that I regret, or I got into some conflicts that, I didn't handle particularly well, but it really gave me an opportunity to really learn how to breathe.
I didn't know John pissed you off that much.
Yeah, I'm such a hard ass. Not nearly as bad as some others, though.
Okay, I cut you off from the music. Tell us about your music.
Yeah, so my mom was an opera singer, and my father's whole side of the family, every single one of them was a musician, and so I kind of grew up with music in the house. My preferred instrument's a guitar. I play guitar and I play piano, and I've been writing music for a long time. But it's what I wanted to be when I grew up, when I was younger. But now I finally have reached a stage of life where I'm going to give myself permission to go do that. So I've started collaborating with other musicians. I've started recording.
What genre of music is your favorite?
I've always been a progressive rock fan, and when I've left to my own devices, I kind of lean in towards that. I love jazz, and so I've been experimenting with both composing and performing jazz pieces as well, but it's mostly progressive rock.
Yeah, you're sitting here with a Peter Gabriel tour shirt 2023 on.
Yes.
So what about AI? How are you feeling about AI and music and
I understand why it's scaring crap out of people. I really do, because AI is essentially slurping up everyone else's intellectual property and then regurgitating bits and pieces of it. But the fear that AI is going to replace a musician, a composer, a performer, I think it's highly overwrought. I'm finding AI to be unbelievably useful in composition. I'll give you a concrete example. I'm composing a jazz piece. I've got the chord progressions laid out. I've experimented on the guitar what I want to do with it. I'm not good enough at the piano to play it, but I can use what's called a session player in Logic Pro, and I can tell it how I want to play the piano, and it will lay the entire piano piece for me, and I can adjust it, the fills, the chord structures, like anything about how the performance is done. And I now have a piano to react against when I play bass or when I play guitar or when I'm singing across that. I don't have to play the piano. And then when it comes to drums, I can lay out using AI. I can use some basic structure of what I want, and then I can give it to a drummer with a chart and say, here, you do this and I do it live. But I can at least can show up with something that is directionally where I want to go with. This is still my composition. This is still my work. This is still the work of the collaboration with other musicians. But we're using AI to be way more efficient. I love it. I think it's really cool.
So you're using it primarily in the industry lingo is it a DAW, a digital audio workstation?
Correct, that's right.
Logic Pro.
That's right.
Have you tried any of those like Suno or UDO, the things that are getting sued by the RIAA? And because that goes a little bit further.
Yes. There. In fact, I had someone write me a song from this group that I'm a part of saying, congratulations on your retirement. And so she programmed through UDO a country and Western song because we were in Nashville.
Awesome.
The whole thing was the lyrics, the performance of some country sounding voice, all the guitar, all the background, all the instrumentation. The entire song was composed by AI and it was fully delivered, like a fully packaged song. It's hysterically funny. I would not call it great music, but it was very funny.
Well, it's very derivative. I mean, we
Totally.
experienced this. We tried making a theme song for our My AI segment earlier this year, and I was able to put it in some of John's favorite genres and country music, and it's a parlor trick. To your point on ChatGPT, it's a great demo.
It's a demo of what can be done. But now give that tool and technology to Hans Zimmer and see what he does with it. And we know, because he said it out loud, he's really having fun with it. Like, let's see what somebody that's a talented composer or musician, let's see what they do with this AI, as opposed to someone simply, I don't know, trying to create a cheesy song.
Well, I got to say, you're my new role model between the music.
Be careful.
Yes.
I mean, really, if there is a way to retire the way you're describing what you plan to do, I mean, hats off to you. I mean, you've always been somebody who's asserted yourself on behalf of what you knew was best for you and the organizations you worked for. And I mean that in a very, very positive and constructive way. And I think it's really cool to see you now applying that to the next phase of your life.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Here is the moment in the exit interview.
Lightning round?
It's kind of the opposite of lightning round. Here's what I was going to say.
Okay.
Is there anything you've ever just wanted to say to the Seattle tech community? And now I know you're just going to say something super nice, but anyway, I'll do it anyway. Is there anything that you would really want a message that you would want to leave the Pacific Northwest, the Washington State, the Seattle tech and innovation community with as we peer from the cliff upon this vast unknown ahead of us with AI and the cloud? And I'm trying to paint a picture here. I need some AI help. Where's ChatGPT?
Yeah.
What would you want to say?
So the first thing I am going to say something positive because I can't help it. I couldn't be more grateful to have accidentally landed here because my wife got a relo. We were in Chicago. I ended up here kind of against my will, thinking, I don't want to work for Microsoft. I don't want to work for Weyerhaeuser. What else is out here? I don't make airplanes. I don't know what I'm going to do out here. Man, did I land in the right place at the right time in 1995. Holy mackerel.
Wow, yeah, you did. Super
grateful that it's been an incredible experience to have a career and raise a family here. The one parting piece of advice that I would give, unsolicited advice, that I would give to this region is, for the most part, we're all hat and no cattle. We talk a good game about working together. We don't. We talk a good game about supporting startups. We're really terrible here. We have literally tens of thousands of multimillionaires printed by this industry living in this region. And yet a per capita participation as angel investors compared to the Valley or Vancouver, BC, we're paltry. And it just bothers me because we like to think of ourselves as progressive. We like to think of ourselves as communal, but it feels a little bit like, hey, I made my millions. I guess I'll go buy my third house and go hang out with my friends. Doesn't feel connected. And I would just challenge this community to be really, truly focused on building together. Because we don't build together. And if we did, I think we might actually become the next Silicon Valley.
We're going to give you the last word. Michael Schutzler, it has been a pleasure talking with you over the years, and this has been really fun. Great way to kind of end the year for us and reflect on everything that's come before and what's next, and we wish you the best.
Thank you. I've enjoyed knowing both of you and working with you for the last, 20 some years, and thank you for many years of support, and thank you for all the good work you do, both of you. Thank you.
There's a guitar shop
Let's go.
up the block. I want to show it to you. Okay. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Curt Milton edited this show. Until next time, I'm Todd Bishop.
And I'm John Cook.
And that is a wrap for the GeekWire podcast in 2024. We're going to take a bit of a holiday break, but we will be back in January. And with that, we will let Michael Schutzler play us out from Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar, a great shop near the GeekWire offices in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood. Happy New Year, everybody.